For most miocete species, their migratory routes and their patterns of energy distribution are not known in detail. However, a few generalizations can be made. New ocean circulation patterns associated with the creation of Southern Ocean during the Oligocene introduced an availability of new food. In response to this availability of new food, the filter feeding mechanisms in Miocene evolved. The migration of these whales might have evolved at the same time, allowing seasonal high latitudes feeding to alternate with breeding in thermally less stressful temperate tropical latitudes. There are two types of migration. These are seasonal feeding migrations that happen during the summer months and seasonal breeding migrations that happen in the winter months. Local migrations are seasonal movements generally between productive high-latitude feeding grounds and low-latitude breeding grounds. After an intensive summer feeding in the high latitudes on planktonic organisms and micronectonic crustaceans, the whales migrate long distances to low latitudes for the winter months. While migrating from the feeding grounds, the whales reduce their food intake massively. However, whales can reduce their period without food by feeding on plankton in mid-latitudes. For example, in spring, blue whales depart their breeding grounds and travel north. They spend the summer months feeding progressively northward along the North American west coast from Baja California to British Columbia. In the Californian current, seasonal upwelling in the spring and summer drives a phytoplankton bloom that occurs progressively later in more northern latitudes. Though the onset and duration of the upwelling seasons are characterized by significant interannual variability, the northward migration of blue whales occurs during the same season as the bloom. In the North Atlantic, humpbacks segregate in summer to specific high-latitude feeding grounds, including the Gulf of Maine, the Gulf of St. Lawrence, Newfoundland, Labrador, Greenland, Iceland, and Norway. In winter, the humpback whales of Alaska and British Columbia in the Pacific Northwest migrate to several low-latitude breeding grounds, including the waters of Hawaii, Mexico, and southern Asia, as seen in Figure 1. Whereas the humpback whales feeding in the eastern North Atlantic in Figure 2 generally migrate to the waters of the Caribbean or West Africa. These winter breeding grounds in the lower latitudes are generally located in bodies of water of low productivity. Therefore, during their stay, the humpbacks mostly do not feed. Due to the lack of food availability, energy constraints force the males to compete over the females with high reproductive potential. Female attractiveness most likely depends on their status, such as whether or not they already have a calf. Therefore, males tend to expend more energy in competition over females without a calf than females with a calf. However, as over the course of the breeding season, females without a calf become increasingly rare, and males become progressively less selective.
Apart from the above mentioned reasons, there are also some different types of hypotheses for why whales might migrate. It might benefit the offspring to avoid predators, or some whales to molt their skins. Migrations of Balaenopterids from mid to high latitude areas have thermoregulatory benefits for the offspring born in warmer waters for repairing and replacing their skin while maintaining thermal integrity. Rasmussen et al. Have further suggested that calf development in warm water may lead to larger adult size and greater reproductive success. Winter migrations to lower latitudes has also reduced the risk of killer whale attacks on the newborn calves, as killer whale abundance is lower in lower latitudes. Therefore, they may avoid predation until the calves achieve sufficient body mass and swimming capability. Although the mammal-eating transition killer whales are in fact less abundant in lower latitudes, Clapham and Rasmussen et al. Nevertheless discounted the killer whale predation hypothesis in favor of the calf thermoregulatory hypothesis. Therefore, according to Pittman et al., this lack of consensus over the past years might have been a clue that whales were making these long-distance migrations for some other reasons. Since most large baleen whales, including most commonly the Balaenopterids, also acquire diatom films on their skin during their summer migration, it is possible that they also need to migrate to warmer waters to mold their skin. Large baleen whales can accumulate enough blubber during 4 to 6 months of intensive summer feeding in Antarctica that they can largely fast for the rest of the year. This could allow them to synchronize their breeding cycle to coincide with single extended seasonal trips to low latitudes for molting purposes. In that case, instead of whales migrating to the tropics or subtropics for calving, whales would be traveling to warm waters for skin maintenance and perhaps find it adaptive to bear their calves while they are there. The warm waters necessary for skin mold could then contribute to the growth and survival of their calves and also allow mothers with calves to avoid areas of high killer whale density in higher latitudes as stated before. This hypothesis could also help explain why non-calving individuals migrate to the tropics, a question that has remained unanswered by previous explanation of whale migrations. If the skin molting migration hypothesis is correct, the traditional paradigm of feeding-breeding migration for large whales would perhaps be better termed a feeding-molting migration, with any increase in breeding success being viewed as a collateral benefit. It remains to be seen, however, if the existing evidence equally well supports a multi-factor explanation for whale migration. Not all Balaenopteridae migrate, however. For example, bright whales hardly migrate at all, presumably being able to satisfy both reproductive and nutritional needs in tropical warm-temperate waters. Also, even among such migratory animals as humpbacks, it may be that not all animals migrate every year. Recent studies of eastern Australia have indicated that a proportion of adult females may not return to the calving grounds each year, and individuals have been reported in summer further north. However, investigations into marine megafauna migrations are difficult because despite recent technological advances, large-scale tracking efforts are still extremely costly, and data on resource distribution is highly dynamic. Ocean habits are difficult to attain.